My name is Ed Whelan. I was president of EPPC from 2004 until 2021. During that time and since then, I've been running my own program on the Constitution, the courts, and the culture. Well, we're a think tank dedicated to defending the great truths of Western culture and the American tradition, and trying to do our best to apply those truths in public policy. My first involvement with EPPC was in 2004, but I had been familiar with the work of its scholars before then, especially George Weigel. Well, I think it was a call. It was a calling to take over EPPC. I really was interested in moving beyond the narrow area of the law. I describe myself as a recovering lawyer, but to reach the deeper cultural issues that present such challenges. Well, there are a lot of great challenges from 2004 to 2021. One would be just the continuing secularization of this country, of its major institutions, from universities to the media to the entertainment world, and so on. A second would be the intense polarization across the political spectrum. Things got very, very intense during that period. And then you had the real rupture within the conservative movement. We've seen that in recent years. Across all of this, you had the internet culture, which leads to a shortened attention span. So I would say that those were some of the challenges that we faced. Well, I was very happy to hand the reins over to Ryan Anderson. Among other things, I think that he's ideally suited to rejuvenate EPPC's scholarly core and to prepare for the challenges of the next 20 years. So I think in 2021, when he took over, you suddenly had Joe Biden's presidency. You had a lot of battles, a lot of deep cultural battles on transgenderism, well, you had a lot of battles across the cultural realm. And I think Ryan was wonderfully positioned to take those on. Well, I think the major challenges that I faced were really the challenges that our culture faced. So you saw some of these challenges in increased secularization and the hostility of major institutions to any sort of positions that they associated with religious believers. You saw the increased polarization across the political spectrum from one side to the other, and real intense hatreds where people seem more interested in crushing their political opponents than in persuading them. I think you saw real questions about what it means to be a conservative, whether we're going to remain faithful to America's classic principles and the moral tradition that underlies them, or whether we're going to chase after some new understanding of what conservatism means. Well, in terms of cultural collapse, I think back to 2003, actually, the Supreme Court's ruling in Lawrence versus Texas, which really paved the way for the adoption and imposition of same-sex marriage nationwide. That showed me that we had really lost an understanding of what a basic institution is. And many folks thought that you couldn't defend marriage without being disparaging towards gays and lesbians. That's simply not true. But the loss of that understanding, I think, was evident in the Supreme Court's ruling in 2003. What I found interesting when I came on board is that I didn't need to go out to recruit new scholars. Lots of established scholars came to us because they saw that we were faithful to our mission, while some other institutions seemed to be abandoning it. So we had a wonderful opportunity to bring various great scholars on board. Well, I'm guessing that most people are not readers of National Review Online's bench memos, where I've been writing for 20 plus years. But I'm really grateful for the impact that bench memos has had on judicial nominations and on issues of constitutional law. I have been pleased to learn that my readers include Supreme Court justices, lots of federal judges, and their law clerks. I had one federal judge tell me recently that he's been reading my work since he was in law school. So I think bench memos has really given me an opportunity to shape and inform how justices and judges think about difficult, controversial legal issues, even before the cases reach them, and then also while they're deciding them. Well, I think my main goal when I took over as president was to give our scholars the support they needed and the freedom they needed to be as effective as possible. It's always been part of our institutional DNA to let our scholars figure out how best to advance our mission. We find people who are dedicated to our mission. We don't micromanage them. We give them the freedom to be as effective as they can. And that's basically the approach I took. In the early part of this century, the development of a tendency to denigrate religious liberty, often by putting it literally in scare quotes, as though it were not something real, as though it were some sort of second class or third class right. It was often presented simply as a supposed excuse for discrimination without any real understanding of the role that religious belief plays in believers' lives. So I think that gave us the challenge to really work to develop religious liberty and to make the case for it, not just in the courts, but in the culture. I think it can always be tempting to jump from one political bandwagon to the next one you see coming down the boulevard. I think that our success over the decades has been because we haven't jumped from one bandwagon to another. We have been, I think, steadfastly faithful to our mission. Of course, how we implement that mission adapts to the political climate, but I think we've been steadfast in our principles. There's both a public side and a private side to our scholars' work. So our scholars will testify before Congress and state legislatures. They'll write essays. They'll write amicus briefs. They'll submit lengthy regulatory comments. They'll be quoted in major media around the country. That's part of the public work. But there's also the private work. It's often more difficult, more time consuming, which is working with legislators and policymakers to craft laws and policies and develop strategy. Well, one big lesson is that the most important decision you make as president are the people you hire as scholars. We want to hire first-rate scholars, people who work independently, who have a drive to be productive, who don't need to be micromanaged and who don't want to be micromanaged. And I think that's been a key to our success. Well, when I made the decision to hand the reins over to Ryan Anderson, I knew that I wanted to continue to do my work here. And I needed to make sure, of course, that I recognized that there were some decisions I had made in the past that were his decisions to make. I would be happy to kibitz, but also be happy if he just went ahead and made them on his own. And sometimes it's a pleasure to have him consult me on something and to be able to say, that's a real challenge, Ryan. Good luck figuring that one out. But no, the work I've been doing on my courts program has been at the heart of what I've done since I joined EPPC. I was wearing two hats for nearly 2 decades, and I want to continue to wear the courts hat for as long as I'm able to. Well, our scholars have the ability to give sustained attention to difficult issues of public policy, to think them through, to understand them at their foundation, and to figure out how best to argue about them in the public square. Legislators and policymakers simply don't have that time, so we can be a real resource to them. Well, I think the one word that I would use to describe EPPC would be principled. We have stayed true to our mission over the decades. We'll continue to do so. We will adapt to different political climates, but we always have our North Star to follow. And our North Star is the set of founding principles that this country has and the moral tradition that underlies and animates and sustains them. Well, it's been a great joy to see Ryan recruit lots of younger scholars, people who will sustain this institution for decades to come, folks who, unlike many of their peers, have the attention span to think through issues critically and to be leaders for some time to come. Well, the challenges are very deep and they go to basic questions of what a human being is. We see this across a host of different issues, and I think that we understand that a proper anthropology is a starting place for answering these questions.